Mark, everybody on this call, just so filled with gratitude. Tis the season. So I'm going to get us started now because it's 1:04 and we had a 1 o'clock appointment. Everybody is excited to get started. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I do want to have a caveat, guys, that we have two of the top producers in our market pouring into us today. Unfortunately, our girlfriend Danielle Clement had a scheduling conflict that could not be avoided. She sends her love and we send our love her way, and we are going to go forward because we've got a lot of good stuff to share. Okay, so I just want to give you some perspective. I'm going to introduce our panelists for those of you that don't know them or don't know about much about their business. We've got the expertise of agents doing close to or almost over $70 million that it's going to be pouring into you today. And they're highly involved in the luxury market and they have huge hearts. And I want to welcome Stacie Whitbeck from Keller Williams Gateway and Mark Siwiec from Keller Williams Greater Rochester. Welcome, you two.
Thank you. I'm so excited to do this. I've been selling real estate for close to 10 years, and this is the first time that I'm ever going to be publicly talking about my business. So I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for asking me.
You're welcome. That's so exciting. First time. Wow.
And Susan, thank you. And I'm still trying, I poured myself a cup of coffee. I'm almost landing, but we can start whenever it is that you want. So.
Okay, we're going to just go on. You got your coffee?
I'm ready to go.
I have orange juice. I would love to say it was a mimosa, but sadly, it's just orange juice. Soon enough, though, for the mimosas. The holidays are coming. So let us kick off. Let's get a lay of the land. I'd like for each of you to share an overview of your business. And Stacie, you already started this, but just a refresher, years in the business. And then this year, an overview of the number of clients you have had the pleasure of serving when you close out your business this year. And your annual sales this year, to give our attendees some scale, some scope, and average sale price. That would be great. We can start. Okay. Stacie, you want to kick us off?
I'm happy to kick it off. I've been in the business, as I said, 10 years. I do work full time, and most of my career has been in this segment of the market, simply because that's where my sphere of influence lies. I'm also licensed in Florida, and I define myself to my clients as I'm a high transaction broker, not a high volume broker. I am a boutique. They get me from beginning to end, good, bad, and ugly. This year I did about a little over 17 million. My average sale was $1.42 million. And that was with only 12 transactions. And I was servicing.
I'm sorry, that's insane.
That
is crazy, Stacie. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm gonna sign off right now.
I serviced, of that 12 transactions, it was only with 8 clients.
Wow.
Yeah, that's luxury, folks.
Wow.
That's luxury right there. You don't need to do a lot in terms of volume to rack up some numbers, but it's also a challenging segment of the market, which we'll get into throughout this presentation.
So I have to welcome our other fearless leader, Anthony Butera, who just joined us. And Anthony, you missed a stat that I think you're going to want to hear. Stacie shared with us that she will close $17 million this year, average sale price of $1.42 million, and close 12 units.
Yeah, we have very similar problems, Stacie. Exact opposite, right?
Yeah, well,
that's insane.
Stacie, I don't know if you know about Anthony's business. He's the top.
Yes,
unit.
I know.
Okay, yeah, so very different, but
and we have problems on both sides of the market here. I don't know what's better or what's worse. You guys can decide throughout the presentation.
Awesome, thank you. And then Mark, please give us your overview.
Sure. Let's see. Who's that? Who you got there?
Oh, this is my girlfriend Bailey. She popped right up when you started talking, so I think she has a crush.
Wow. Hey, Bailey. Nice to meet you, cutie. So I didn't catch all the questions, so direct me if you wouldn't mind. Yes. But 60 million. So we will close $60 million of the real estate this year. There's myself. There are three other agents on the team who are responsible for that. Average sale price about $285,000 $500,000. Did I miss anything?
Awesome. Number of transactions inside of that business this year.
I think it was 185.
Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then, you know what else is really cool? I was pulling some broker metric stats before getting onto this panel, because I really wanted to give you both kudos to the growth that you've seen in your businesses this year. Not only just, it's awesome to give any kudos for growth, but in a year of a pandemic, in a year where the market went backwards, I'm showing, and this might not have all your numbers, broker metrics doesn't always have for sale by owners and things like that you might have sold, right, or represented the buyer for, but I'm showing that Stacie, you are up 4 million or more, probably or more year to date over last year. So it doesn't include the closings that might be happening in the next couple of weeks. Mark, you're up almost 9 million. So 20%. Stacie, you're up 234%. I mean, that's amazing, you guys. I don't know if you knew that, but that's incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a real testament, and I mean this. It's a real testament to you and to Chuck and to Anthony and Keller Williams. I mean, yeah. So thanks.
You're welcome. Now, before I get into my next question, I'm just going to ask one more related to setting us up with a lay of the land for your business. Are you guys currently a member of KW Luxury Division?
I am.
Okay. Mark, are you?
I have no idea what it is. Sorry.
No.
Sorry.
That's
Chuck, sorry, Chuck.
He's gonna text you right now and be like, "What are you talking?"
Yeah, he already did.
Well, you are gonna learn a lot today then from Stacie, because she's got the pulse on that for sure. Given that her business is entirely in that market, she definitely leverages the strength of that program. So she's gonna share a ton about that with us all. All right, so question number two. Let's define luxury for our audience. What price range do you consider to be luxury in our market?
Boy, oh boy. I think the answer is almost, it depends on who the buyer is and who the seller is that you're talking to. So, I mean, I think that most people would say anything over $500,000 is luxury. I think an argument can be made anything over $750,000. So, Stacie?
It's funny, Mark, we never even spoke about this, but I agree with you. I think in the old days, we would have said 500,000-ish. As inventory has shrunk in the eastern suburbs, I think that's crept up to 750. Clearly, the Finger Lakes is much higher. That's where I do a lot of my business. On the more popular lakes, Canandaigua, Keuka, Skinny Atlas, we're looking 7 figures for luxury.
Yeah.
Some of the smaller lakes or less popular lakes, Seneca, Honeoye, Canisius, Cayuga, I would say 500 to 600-ish.
Okay. Thank you for that. Stacie, do you remember there's a formula that one of our contacts at KW shared with us? Remember I introduced you to the woman, what is her name? It's escaping me right now because I'm not.
She's from Dallas. She's incredible.
Dallas. She was the head of KW Luxury for a while. It escapes me, but we were having conversations with her, and she shared a formula that doesn't translate to every market, but it's good-ish, right? Where she said, generally take the average sale price of the market, and then there's a factor multiplication where it's a factor of X gets you to high end and a factor of Y gets you to luxury. Do you remember that?
I don't, and I would love to know that metric. I know that KW Luxury sets the standard as 500,000 in our market. That's what they have defined luxury, which is important because depending on where the price point falls, breaks you into different levels of digital marketing opportunities.
Right. I think, I was just doing the math in my head. I think the number she used for a starting point for quick math was 2 times for a high end, 3 times for luxury. So if our average
that would be right.
is 165 right now, right? Double is 330. So that's considered high end for a lot of people. And then luxury would be another 160, so almost 500.
Yeah.
I just thought that was an interesting conversation. So,
yeah.
Okay, before we dive into tactics and strategies, I want to start with mindset, because doesn't everything kind of start with mindset? Talk to us about the mindset of your high-end clients. And I'm going to ask some ancillary questions to get us churning. What do they value? What are their expectations? And are these values and expectations different than the average consumer?
Stacie, you want to start or should I start?
I would be delighted to. There's two things I want to call to your attention. The first one is, I think it's very important to credential yourself. I think they're looking for successes in that segment of the market. I think for someone like me who came into real estate, I was in healthcare for 25 years. I was a C-level healthcare executive, C-level meaning CEO, COO, CFO. So I needed to make the case to my sphere of influence that I had transferable business experience, which I was successfully able to convert that from the healthcare industry into real estate. It's very important that they know who they're dealing with. You are on the same level as their attorneys, their accountants, their financial advisors. And when you work in this segment of the market, you end up partnering with these people as you buy and sell real estate. There's an interesting dynamic that emerges with high net worth individuals that I've always known, but I've never put into words until I was preparing for this presentation. High net worth individuals are obviously very successful. They're business owners, they're C-levels in corporate environments, they're high-ranking executives. They're used to winning. These are alphas. They dominate in negotiations, not to be aggressive, but they're just good at what they do. They understand leverage, they use leverage other day. Overlay that with the fact that many of them are sitting in highly over-improved homes that have no context to market. I see Mark nodding.
Oh God, keep going. I'm just gonna I'm gonna pull out a cigarette. I'm gonna sit here and listen to you. I mean, keep going.
It's not contextual to market value, but they've improved their homes because they can for lifestyle requirements, whatever. So by virtue of listing their house, we are putting them in a position where they're going to lose, which is someplace that they're not used to being. They're used to winning. They're not going to get their return on investment. So it's incumbent upon me as their broker to immerse the conversation in reality at the first substantive contact. Talk about the data. And my job is to create a framework where they can win. And winning is contextual to the market. There's only a few homes that sell at the high level in our community. As a matter of fact, you may be surprised or not to learn that in Pittsburgh this year, in one of the most robust economies we've experienced in decades, there was one house so far that's sold over $1 million.
Yep.
There's two more in the pipeline, but they haven't closed yet. In Canandaigua, record-breaking year. Only 8 houses sold. Last year, 7, the year before, 5. So it's a very narrow segment. So a win, in my mind, is to be one of the few houses that sell. There's often way more inventory than there are buyers. So that's important from a mindset to understand that they're going to get a little cranky because they're leaving a lot of money on the table. So reframe what the win is. Maybe it's breaking the record. Maybe it's having the highest sale, which is nowhere near the initial investment, but it's still a win. If they sell their house before the neighbor does, I call that a win.
Love that. Reframe the win. That is so powerful. Wow. Thank you. Mark.
Yeah.
Add to that. Take us on your journey.
What the hell was the question? I mean, like Stacie did a great job of answering about a dozen questions there. So seriously, Stacie, that was spot on. I'm not sure if I'm going to have anything to add to it, but go ahead and tee it up if you would, Susan.
Sure. So we're digging into the mindset of the luxury consumer. And I think the reason I wanted to start here is because I think so often as agents or a general public, we tend to think and look at high net worth individuals as there's more stress, there's more pressure, they expect more, and there is that, and they're also real people too. So how do we arm ourselves with information to show up to that meeting with them and give them what they need?
Stacie, as I'm going through, feel free to jump in with anything that I'm saying. If you got like a thought like, oh yeah, you're like, no, you're dead wrong. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Just jump in. But let's start with the whole notion of credentialing. Stacie, I completely and absolutely agree with you in terms of credential. And it's funny. No, let me back up. Let me talk about the mindset, and the mindset for so many of these people is these are masters of the universe. These are the ruling class of Rochester. These are the people who have the net worth. They're marquee names. We read about them in the paper day in and day out. There's a lot of ego involved. I mean, an enormous amount of ego. So a lot of your time is spent just working with them, holding their hands, and to be honest, I mean, there are what? How many people are on the call right now, Susan? 29, 39?
We have 40 people on the call right now.
40. Okay. Um, Stacie sells the bulk and the majority of her real estate is in this. I sell a lot of this stuff, but I got to be honest. For those of you thinking like, I want to be the guy who's selling $1 million property. At the end of the day, if I had to choose between having one $750,000 property or selling three $250,000 properties, I swear to God, folks, all day long, I will take three $250,000 properties.
Is that because you're managing the ego, Mark? Is that
because? And I was just going to say, and the reason for that is because these properties tend to sit on the market for a long time. There's a lot of ego involved. People are used to having like success. They're used to having people at beck and call, and you're having to take phone calls day in and day out. How come there's no showings? And well, it's because you're overpriced by $150,000. But you've got to pay a certain amount of deference. But there's this fine line between paying this deference to them because they're your client, because they are the CEO of, or because they whatever. But at the same time, you can't pay so much deference that they feel as though you are inferior to them in any way. And they are then allowed the privilege of just walking all over you, because when that happens, game over, like you're dead meat. And it's just, it gets pretty ugly. So I think that's a really, really important place to start. You do have to credential yourself, back to Stacie's point. And I think there are probably 2 or 3 ways that you can credential yourself. One is that just with the passing of time, when I started, my average sale price was probably 100. My dad was a cop in the city of Buffalo. I grew up in a 900 square foot ranch. So I started selling to people I started selling $125,000 properties. If I was lucky, it was probably more like $85,000 at that point in time. This was back in like 1876 when real estate was just starting out as an industry. And then you rise and you rise and you rise and you rise, and you get to the point where you're selling the 350, and then you're selling the 4, and then you're selling the 550 and the 6, and you start to rise and you start to catch the attention of some of these people. But the other way to do it is you are part of the social sphere, the social network, and you're tied in with all these. So if any of you find that you are listing one of these properties, $750,000, $800,000 or above, if you're not part of these social networks, you got to read the paper. You've got to read the paper day in and day out and know who these people are. Because if somebody's saying, yeah, well, when I was talking to Marty the other day, you better know who Marty is. And Marty is probably Marty Musi, the CEO of Paychex. You don't want to say, oh, who's Marty? So there are these. I remember, I'll leave you with this, and then I'll take we'll go on to the next question. I remember being at a cocktail party in New York City about 15 years ago. It was a very, very high end, very la-di-da sort of. And I had mentioned to somebody, this was the person who was the head of fundraising for all of Lincoln Center. Very, very used to securing $25 million donations, $10 million donations. And I said that I was excited because I was going to Morocco. And he's like, oh, well, where are you staying? And I said, I'm not quite sure. He said, are you staying at La Mamounia? And I looked at him, I said, what's La Mamounia? The guy looked at me, and I swear to God, I am not. He walked away. He didn't say, oh, it's a hotel, or he didn't say, you don't know what. He literally just turned and walked away, because in that moment, he knew that I wasn't a player. He knew that I had like no idea what La Mamounia was, and he wasn't going to get a $10 million check out of me. He moved on to the next. The same thing applies to local real estate. You got to be a part of the club, the group, and you got to be credentialed. I'll stop there.
That's awesome. That just, I think, frames it so well around earning that validity inside those circles, because when you are in that situation, you want to have the ability to deliver bad news, push back, challenge, and know that they're going to accept that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing that came to mind inside of this conversation was around, you mentioned a lot of ego involved. I've taken so many notes, you guys. You mentioned about, oh gosh, there's some position them not to lose, reframing it. There's a lot of fierce conversations inside of that. Inside of the listing appointment, I would think, and as well as if it's sitting on the market because it's a higher price property, it's not going to sell as quickly normally. There's a lot of fierce conversations inside of every week or whatever your communication regiment is with them, bringing them back to that. And so I would recommend to anyone on this call to pick up the book by Susan Scott, Fierce Conversations. It's also a course that KW has offered in the past, and learn how to navigate those conversations. If you're an agent that leans away from them versus leans into them, you will not be successful in this market, in the luxury market.
Susan, what Mark is talking about is client management. And client management is the most important thing at any segment of the market. And that goes from framing expectations to the way you communicate regarding the whole transaction. I think there are some real challenges in working with high net worth individuals who have so much business acumen of their own. Many of them think they know as much as I do about real estate. And it is my job over time. And understand that my whole approach to my business is as a consultant. I'm not a salesperson. I'm providing real value added because they're not as good as I am with real estate. They don't know what I know about real estate. And I think the sooner and the quicker you can establish that expertise, that rolls out to the entire 1 year you may be together trying to sell a property. And I have found that the better I do upfront is establishing myself as the expert, I can avoid some of these things that Mark is talking about. What he's talking, these are real issues, and they can be very challenging. And for agents who are breaking into this segment of the market, it can break you. It can be very intimidating. And that's why you've got to go in, prepare. That is the X factor in establishing your credibility, really in any profession.
Just a quick question, and then Susan, I'd love to hear, Stacie, do you have one particular profession that you find is most challenging?
Well, there's challenges with, like engineers. Engineers can be very challenging to work with. They hold you to the letter of the word. You've got to be very exact in your communication. I think any C-level who is financially privileged, they're not used to dealing, and yet so much money is wrapped up into these homes that they're forced to participate in the process. So I think they're all difficult, to be honest.
Okay. For me, it's surgeons. Sorry, but for me, it's surgeons. I like they can rip open somebody's chest, pull it apart, grab somebody's heart, throw a new one back in. So they're God. Don't tell me that my house isn't worth $1.6 million. So
yeah, I'm married to one of those.
That's why I said sorry.
So, no, it's interesting because given my experience, my primary training, you guys, is as a registered nurse. I was one of the executive vice presidents of nursing at Highland. I mean, I was in healthcare for a long time. I know those people. So, and they know me. So the dynamic can sometimes be different with them, but yeah. And the problem with that group of high net worth individuals is they don't know a lot about business. So that's challenging.
Yeah.
Guys, this is fascinating. Let's move on to a question around how you approach a luxury listing. Okay, so how do you approach a luxury listing versus a non-luxury listing consultation? And I'll set us up with a few follow-up questions that might help give you context. So how do you approach a luxury listing consultation versus a non-luxury listing consultation? And then from that, are there any tools or strategies you employ specifically for the luxury market?
Do you want to take this one first, Mark?
Sure. And this is in some ways, Susan, I think a repetition of some of this that we've already talked about. So actually, this is when I first started in the business 30 some years ago. I started with Gar Lowenguth, and I was 22 or 23 years old, and I had a Nissan Sentra. And every once in a while, I would get an opportunity to list a 350 or $400,000 property, and I would ask Gar. I said, Gar, I need the keys to the car, and he had this fantastic Jag, like this unbelievable Jag, and he would throw me the keys to the car. And as a 23-year-old kid, I would jump into the Jag. I would drive to the appointment because I didn't want to show up at that appointment in some piece of shit Nissan Sentra that was rusting, that needed a new muffler. So,
Swear jar.
What's that?
Swear jar. Just kidding.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of approaching some of the strategies, you've got to position yourself visually. So make sure that if you don't have a great car, make sure that you're borrowing a car. But seriously, and I swear to God, I'm not just making this up. Call me up. I'll give you my car. I don't really care. Like, I'll give you the car. It's a nice car. And drive it off. Just don't get into an accident. If you get into an accident, you get into an accident. I don't care. Another thing is, you want to make sure that you're wearing a great suit. $125,000 property is probably not a good idea to show up in a suit because you may be intimidating $125,000 client. But you know what? If you got some Armani or some Zegna or Canali in your closet, that's a perfect time. And I think in terms of approach and setting it up, setting aside a long time, setting aside a lot of time, bringing your best marketing material. I usually bring, and the only segment of the market that I bring anybody from my team is for higher end. And part of it is, know yourself and know who you are. I've never been diagnosed as, but I'm assuming I've got a pretty good case of ADD going on. And I'm probably a good candidate for Ritalin. And I really mean that. So
With thyself.
yeah, exactly. So I can't after 3 months or after 3 weeks, who am I kidding? After 3 weeks, I'm like, are you kidding me? So I bring somebody with these higher end because I know they're going to be in the market for 6, 9, 12 months. And so I need somebody to make sure that they're like remaining focused. So setting aside enough time at the onset, talking to these people about their property. Honestly, part of it for me is stroking their ego, and then giving them a lot of information. These are people who like information. Oh, and then the last point that I'll make is back to Stacie's point, and I'll keep coming back to this over and over again. I think it's so important, making sure that you're credentialing yourself. So, oh yeah, did you go to so-and-so's wedding? Wasn't that incredible? Or yeah, did you hear what happened with so-and-so? I mean, that's you gotta make sure that they know that you're part of the club. So Stacie?
I thought long and hard about this question. I think generally speaking, I approach every listing appointment the same. I work from an agenda format as opposed to doing a formal kind of listing presentation on an iPad. I don't know about you, Mark, but I find, especially on the luxury segment, and you're dealing with these C-levels or these surgeons, as soon as you pull out an iPad and start going through the Keller Williams listing presentation, you've lost them. They don't resonate to that.
Right, yeah.
I think they resonate far more to an agenda-driven business meeting, frankly. And how it is different between luxury and non-luxury is an immediate identification of what the pain point is going to be, and then tailor the presentation to show how you're going to address what that pain point is. You guys who are fortunate enough to be working in the $250,000 to $500,000 range this year, there ain't no pain point except for how many showings there are. But for luxury buyers, the pain point is going back to, I've got a very narrow segment of buyers who are looking for homes, and we're going to lose. Someone's going to lose. And so my presentation and my consultation is spent talking about creating that sweet spot. How are we going to win? How do we price it to win? What are the goals? If there's not an immediate goal to sell and you want to test the market, that's a different strategy. But I think by and large, I try to structure my work the same regardless of price point, but the issues are different depending on where you sit, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you can ask me questions about that if I'm missing the question, if you want to push on that a little bit.
Well, I'm gonna ask you a question, because I think you and I probably approach this from the same vantage. There are a couple of, regardless of the price point, we all know that there are agents out there who are buying listings by going in and telling the $150,000 homeowner that their house is worth $180,000. And Stacie, you and I know who we're talking about here. Probably most everybody does. At least my strategy is to go in, and it's hard enough to sell these properties, but I'm not going to tell the $1.5 million seller that their house is worth $1.7 million because A, it's going to be on the market for sale for a year if you do have it at the right price. B, I want to make sure that from the get-go, I'm just being dead nuts honest with them and never. And if I don't get the listing, I don't get the listing, because if it's being listed for $1.7 million, I'm not going to sell it. So why waste a year of my time and aggravation and money on trying to sell something that's overpriced by $200,000 and then working at trying to get them down over and over and over again? Stacie, do you want to riff off of that in any way?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And that's actually part of my presentation is I talk about how I work, and that I'm not the type of agent who's going to nod my head and tell them what they want to hear to get the listing, because the most important thing to me is developing what I call an annuity relationship with my clients. And we all know what an annuity does. It pays over time. It's a long-term relationship and commitment. High net worth individuals buy and sell a lot of property. They buy and sell a lot of their own personal property. They buy property for their children. They liquidate property for their parents and other relatives. It's very important that you start out firmly with what your beliefs are relative to market value. You will not get repeat business if you nod your head and tell someone they're going to get $500,000 over market value. I'm here to tell you, you're not going to get it. And it hurts you. It hurts you so badly because everybody's watching these listings. And if they see that you've got the listing and you haven't sold it, the guy down the street is probably not going to use you. So it's important to have a lot of integrity in your pricing. If you want to break into this segment of the market, that is not the way to do it.
Agreed.
Thank you so much. I love that you guys are both in agreement on that. We are going to, what I want to do is pivot to KW commercial for a second. Just Stacie, I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about, because we're on the topic of tactics and strategies and because we're on the topic of tools and strategies specifically for the luxury market. I thought that was a good lead in for you to share your experience with KW Luxury and some of the things that you have access to in that. If there are agents here interested in learning about more, this is a great place to start. So let's go there. And then what we're going to do is I'm getting some questions in the chat. For the last 15 minutes, I'm going to turn it over to the audience. Okay.
Sure. I think KW Luxury is important for your value proposition as an agent. When you're competing in this segment of the market where there's very few homes that are listed. I mean, how many houses were sold in Pittsburgh last year? We have 8 or 10 that are listed in this range. So it's important when you're going after this business that you're giving people a reason to choose you. KW Luxury is a tool that can be used because it opens up a digital marketing platform that most other agents don't have access to. It's also KW's way of competing with the big luxury houses like Christie's, Sotheby's. We need to be out there. And luxury real estate is not just a regional business. It's a national and it's an international business. So how am I reaching clients in Europe, in Asia? Is it in languages that they can read in other countries? And that's one of the important things that KW Luxury provides you. It costs more money, you guys, to be a luxury agent. I'm going to lay it out there. You have to pay an additional fee to have access to this platform. You have access to some very high-end, beautiful print publications that you should probably take advantage of if you're in this segment. you have to pay a lot of money on professional photography and
Mhm.
videos, and your marketing collaterals are extremely important because there's, again, to keep repeating myself, there's a handful of buyers. And I need to make sure that the property I'm representing is the shiniest, prettiest, has the most stunning visual images that I can get. And that's not going in with my own camera and taking a few shots. So to summarize, I think KW is particularly important as you're building your value proposition as an agent. I don't think you can really go after this business if you can't compete with the Sotheby's and some of the other luxury houses that offer this as standard fare for all of their listings.
It's something that Keller Williams has developed to help you stand out in a luxury market. It is something that you have to earn the right into. So not every agent can qualify. You have to, and this is a national qualification, you have to sell 2 homes or more a year, $500,000 or more, because they want to make sure that you are in that market and you earn that badge, you earn the stripes. Basically, it's a $1,200 a year membership fee to get access to all of the things that Stacie was mentioning. And I think I'll just add, Stacie, you mentioned the digital platforms that are available, just to give it context for people to understand what that means and how is that different from what I have access to today. Correct me if I'm wrong on the dollar amount, but I think any home over $750,000 or more goes on to mansionsglobal.com, and any home over 500,000 or more goes on to wallstreetjournal.com, which appeals to 2 different segments of high net worth individuals.
Yeah, it also goes on to Barron's, and all of those sites are connected to a myriad of other sites, both national and international, that are translated into multiple languages. A lot of my business is not from this state. And so it's very important that you have a platform to market these homes. And that's particularly important with an over improved house where you're telling your clients what the market value is. It may be worth 2 million. They've got 5 or 6 million invested. They may want to do some testing of the market at a higher price. And the beautiful thing about having these national and international platforms by which I can market is I can have an agreement with them to market these houses for 6 to 8 weeks. ListHub gives me the number of digital impressions I've had, and I have metrics that show me if I've had, if I've had 6,000 marketing impressions and the phone hasn't rang one time for a showing, I've got a price problem. And that tangible data and being able to go back to a client and say, look, we've been in Forbes, we've been in Barron's, we've been in the Wall Street Journal. I've had 6,000 people that have taken the time to click through the property and haven't called me. We've got to reduce the price. I don't get a lot of pushback, you guys. But what I do get is a sigh of relief that, well, we tried to get 5 million. So now we can settle for something less. That's all they're looking for, is they want you to do your job. The MLS doesn't cut it.
Yep.
Awesome. And the other thing I'll add real quick about the KW luxury before we move on, just from a branding perspective and understanding the power of a luxury brand, is that having the KW luxury platform as an option for your business allows you to differentiate your branding with the high-end clients from your other business. And it, in terms of different signage, completely different KW logo, there are strict standards and guidelines around a KW luxury sign. Whereas we as a KW family give you all a lot of autonomy with your regular sign, right? With our regular signs, we've got different colors out there. We've got different logos. KW luxury, there's very strict standards around the material, and it's only a couple of different options because they do not want to dilute the brand. They want to protect the brand. So it's great because in our company, you can live in both worlds and both of those brands are protected. I'm going to do a quick pause and a time check. It's 1:43. We had this class marketed for an hour, and I know that sometimes they can run over, but my job is to make sure that we keep to the time schedule. So I'm going to ask our panelists in advance, Stacie and Mark, if we go over by 10 minutes, do you have that option? If not, I'll tie a bow on it and we'll do a round 2 of this at another point.
I've got somebody from the team joining me at 2 o'clock. Let's play it by ear. I'll just bow out one. Yeah.
Sounds good. I'm gonna drive to stick to 2. Okay, so I'm going to launch into some questions from the panelists here that are in our chat box. Okay, so we can do kind of some rapid fire response. I love this one from Mary. Is there a balance between credentialing and trying too hard or bragging? Feels like it could backfire. Love that question.
Absolutely. So Stacie's also smiling. I mean, you can't be too, you have to like the property, and really you got to love the property, but you can't be breathlessly like, and you can't be starstruck. And you have to make sure that you're not trying too hard, because it is a very, very, very fine line. Because again, back to Stacie's point, these are very, very, very sophisticated individuals, and they can sniff out authenticity and far greater than most. So Stacie, you want to add to that in any way?
Yeah. If I do a 60-minute initial meeting, I may spend 4 or 5 minutes credentialing myself. I think you can read the room, as an experienced agent. It's very important that people know, because keep in mind, client management will be an issue with these folks. It's very important that they know not to mess with you. Okay. And there's a way you can do that and not be obnoxious, but I've run a hospital. I can sell your house. Okay. I certainly don't say it that way, but I want to be very clear that I have real expertise, and I want to present that in a way to build confidence in them, so that they have confidence in me as a professional. And I must say, it's never backfired. I also provide a branded folder with some highlights of my career, with a biography, a few other things. So they certainly, if they're interested, can read the full breadth of my experience. I don't want to bore them, but I absolutely have to credential myself. I don't want to lose to Mark Siwiec, who's coming in the next day, and he's got a lot more experience than me. And that's part of my value prop. Why pick me over Holly?
Yeah.
Or Jamie
Oh,
Columbus?
do you have 20 minutes? Do you have half an hour? I'll give you all the reasons.
Resume. We're going to move on.
Sorry.
I'm going to skip around. Anthony, you have a great question here. What unique issues happen between acceptance of offer till closing in the high-end market compared to the regular market?
Oh, I think this is one where Stacie and I are going to have different answers. So Stacie, you want to start with this one? Because I've got a very short answer to this.
You go first.
My answer is, Anthony, almost nothing. And what I mean by that is, at this point in time, once you've brought buyer to seller, I find that I have very, very, very few problems or difficulties, only because these are business people, and they've vetted the contract, and their attorneys have vetted the contract, and there usually aren't issues of financing. People who in this price point, they're going to get their mortgage. They're going to be approved for their mortgage. So for me, it's usually a cakewalk from time that the offer is written until transfer of title. Stacie, do you feel? I think you feel differently.
No, 100%. I mean, if you can get there, and you can negotiate the luxury tax. There's crazy things that happen in every transaction that I don't think are, like, I had a house this year, as Susan knows, flood, take out the whole first floor. That had nothing to do with the fact that it was a luxury property. It was just, are you kidding me? If I experience issues, it's usually relative to title. There may be some issues with title. This year's been a nightmare, getting title reports back, dealing with the town on certain variances, et cetera. But I think the biggest issue tends to be, and this is where the agent is the X factor, is that luxury tax. I mean, you should be talking about that luxury tax way early in the transaction, so it doesn't come as a shock to either the buyer or the seller when that comes up. There needs to be a clear understanding of what this house is going to cost.
And you and I had a really great conversation recently, Stacie, about laying out the expectation of who's going to pay for that luxury tax up front, because you can get to a point where the seller's looking at the buyer and the buyer's looking at the seller, and now you have to renegotiate that. Whereas if you clearly talk about that up front, it helps, right? You want to add a little bit more to that?
Well, if I'm representing the seller and I've told the seller we're not paying it, and then the buyer's agent has told the buyer we're not paying it, that doesn't help. But in the end, in the context of the entire transaction, you guys, this isn't a bunch of money. This isn't a lot of money to these people.
Right.
It's just not. And so I think it's important to inform them, to talk about the possibility that one or the other could pay, or in a lot of cases split. It's just, $1 million house, it's 10 grand. It's just not a lot of money in the context of all the transaction. And if we haven't gotten beaten up too bad in an inspection, then a lot of time the seller feels so fortunate after I've prepped them. They're so lucky to have this buyer. A lot of times they'll just pay it if it gets to that.
But a lot of the time, time also, you're not dealing with logic. Sometimes it's oh my God, I thought it was a $1.3 million property and he just sold it for $1.05 million, and screw them. I'm not going to I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to pay that the tax. And so you have to then you've got to stop relying on logic, and you got to stop relying on emotion, and you've got to get them to look at the logic. And why don't we talk about it tomorrow morning? Think about it overnight, and just give them time to like settle down, so that you can just start to play to their ego.
And that's an excellent point, Mark, because I'm sure you've experienced the same as I have. Clients' first reaction is rarely the reaction that they're going to have a few days from now. I don't know very many people at all, unless they've got a lot of FU money, which a lot of my clients do. They're just not going to lose a deal over 15 or even 20 grand. I mean, there's opportunity costs associated with holding these big properties. And that's where the agent is the X factor. Manage your clients, know when to push, know when to pull back. And listen, I'm a consultant. You don't want to sell this house? That's fine with me. I'm very clear about what the consequences are of any given action. And I find that following up an emotional interaction with a lovely, concise, non-reactive email is very effective in getting people to move through some of these stages.
Yep.
Love that. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick one here. So Lynn asks, Stacie, is it safe to assume you attend showings and provide a tour or show via e-box? Can you guys tell us what you both do there for the high-end properties? Go.
For my luxury properties, I absolutely have to be there. I'm the X factor. If I'm not afraid to be out there on pricing, you guys. If I can support the value of a house, I am not afraid to be the most expensive house ever listed. And that's because I believe in the house. That's been my assessment, not the client's direction. So I need to be there. I need to talk about the very complex and sophisticated HVAC system that is hotel grade quality. I need to talk about the smart home. I need to be able to demonstrate these features. I need to support that value and stand behind my price. I also need to understand how my house compares to every other property that I'm competing against, and in a very non-reactive, non-detrimental way throughout the course of my tour. As I'm asked questions about the house down the street, I can compare and contrast the amenities between the two.
But some of it is also theater, meaning that you need to demonstrate to your clients that you care enough about this that you haven't handed it off to one of the other agents on your team. Part of the reason that people hire Stacie or me or Holly is because we're known entities. We have a reputation, and so they want. And it's really funny. I honestly don't feel as though I'm doing anything in some of these appointments that is all that. But oh my God, if I'm not there, the deal is not going to come together. Whereas Josh and Aaron and Mark are great, but a lot of the time I've got to be there because they want the name, if you will. So I think it's very, very, very important. You've got to demonstrate and also part of it is just the care and the feeding of your clients, making sure that your clients know that you care enough that you actually showed up for the appointment. So, and actually, Stacie, wouldn't you agree? A lot of these, you have to, it's part of the negotiation right up front. Well, if we go with you, will you be here for each and every showing? And the answer is absolutely. You know, actually, no, what I usually say is I can promise you that I will be here for 90% of all the showings.
I have a standard kind of practice model. There are certain homes, and again, we're the experts, you guys, do not give that up. There are certain homes that do not require the agent to be there. And as a matter of fact, there's a whole school of thought that sometimes having the agent there who's representing the seller can interfere with the buyer's ability to kind of connect with that house. I don't want you to waste any of your time because time is money. There are certain houses that I absolutely have to be there. And if a client sets expectations for me of what, and starts pushing back on what my professional judgment is, that gives me pause. I don't need to be told by my client where I need to be and when to sell this house. There's only one thing I want to do for them, and that's sell their house. If I need to be there, I'll be there. If I don't, I won't. And so I make it really clear up front, so it's not even a question. You know, these multi-million-dollar houses on the lake, I'm there every time. And it's not as much time as you think it takes because I fully financially vetted everyone that comes into one of these houses. No one gets in the house if they haven't already shown me the money. I don't have time for that. And most of these people are out of towners. So that is good time that I'm going to spend. So you know how to do this. Don't be pushed around.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. I love this question because some people use these in their business, some don't. And so a perspective on what you do in the luxury market would be great. What kinds of closing gifts are appropriate for luxury clients?
I love closing gifts. It depends on the, you know, the price of the house and how much of a commission you've gotten. I give lavishly. Again, I look at that as marketing costs. You know, that leaves such a tremendous impression. So I'll give a piece of art from a local artist. I use, Mark, you know, Elizabeth from More Fire Glass.
Yep.
I'll give some of her glass sculptures. You know, I kind of get the aesthetic and the vibe of what the client likes. I have set up relationships with arenas and Man's Jewelers where they give me VIP packaging and VIP deliveries. You know, I'm looking to not only show my gratitude for giving the opportunity to work for these folks, but I also want to be very impactful in the gift that I give them so that every time they look at that, they're not looking at a magnet on the refrigerator that has my name. They're looking at a beautiful piece of art or a beautiful piece of servingware. So, you know, I'll spend $1,000 if it's if it's an $80,000 commission. I think I can afford $1,000 gift.
Yeah. One of the things that, excuse me, one of the things that, because so many of these clients have everything they could possibly need or want, one of the things that we've started to do is we find out because a lot of these folks will sit on local boards and committees and they'll share. So we'll find out what their charity is of choice. And then we'll write a large check. We'll make a donation in their name or in their honor, which I think is nice. But almost very oftentimes, though, I'll make sure that we're taking them out to an outrageous meal, a really, really great meal, just to make sure that you're, cementing that bond, if you will. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. I always take my clients out to what I call a celebratory dinner, and I include my husband, and I make it a couple's night, and it does cement the relationship in a very real way. I'm not looking to have every client be a best friend, but I think those types of experiences can be very impactful for your clients. It shows your appreciation, your generosity, and frankly, I enjoy it.
Yeah. $150 gift certificate for the Barrel of Dollars is not going to work with this crowd. So
I love that.
Great, Chuck.
Thanks for being so candid and honest about that. We have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to end with one final question. And by the way, attendees, I'm so grateful for all of your questions in here. I will make sure that I can try to get some of these to Stacie and Mark offline and circle back with you, but we weren't able to get to all of them today. Some of them I think we can easily circle back offline. So the last question that I want to leave us with, and it can be like kind of a really succinct rapid fire answer, whatever comes to you first, would be, what is the one piece of advice you would give to a new agent or a seasoned agent that is looking to break into the luxury market? One piece of advice.
You've got to get that first transaction. And the follow-up was, well, Stacie, how do you do that? I mean, you to break into this market, you're building and leveraging your success. And it's not easy to get that first transaction. So when you get that first transaction, or you're competing for that first transaction, see if you can partner with one of the luxury agents in our office. You need to point to someone who has the credentials and the experience while you're building it. Keep in mind, as generous as these folks are, they don't want to risk what is a significant investment for them to give you a chance to sell something luxury.
Yeah.
Stacie, Anthony said you find better friends than I have.
What's that?
Anthony said you find better friends than I have.
Yeah, right.
Always good for the comedic break. Mark, bring us home. One piece of advice for an agent looking to break into luxury.
It's similar to what Stacie said. I think that you need to, I think networking is incredibly important in this, and just network and network and network and network, and go from the $85,000 listing that I started with, and then work your way up to the 150, you know, and with the pet, don't try to get into this market too early on, too soon in your career. You've got to build a reputation. You've got to build a skill set. And then once you're there, just know that you got one chance, one opportunity. And if you blow it, it's a small network, and your name will travel one way or another. Like, yep, they're really great. They did a great job on my behalf, or yeah, they blew it. They didn't do a good job. So there you go. I'm not sure if that was one piece of advice, but there you have it.
Thank you. Thank you. Guys, we are getting so much great feedback in the chat. Thank you. Really great info. Thank you, Stacie and Mark. Thank you so much. This was really great. Thanks for being the great presentation. We are so grateful and filled with gratitude.
Thank you
thanks
for
so much,
having
Susan.
me. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Have a great afternoon. Thanks very much, Susan. Thanks, Chuck, Anthony. Take care, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, bud, how are you?